When you sent me packing down in Green River Valley, I knew that if you couldn't, then no.
Hey, this is Adam with Mile High Stash, the podcast that asks what 5 albums you would take to a remote Colorado cabin in the event of a zombie apocalypse, armed only with food, water, and a crank-powered Victrola. When I ask my guests that question and picture the remote Colorado cabin, I always think of little Ward, Colorado, up by Peak to Peak Highway. And that's exactly where I spent this last weekend at my buddy's little cabin. I won't say exactly where it is, but it doesn't have water or electricity, let alone food. And it was great sitting by the fire, after riding my bike all day in the mountains. And I didn't really take 5 albums, and I didn't have a crank-powered Victrola, but I did listen to Midlake and Duke Ellington and Air and Pearl Jam and Murder by Death. I think those are the artists that I listened to. And the fact that there wasn't a zombie apocalypse, was nice. Anyway, this week, our guest on Mile High Stash is the legendary Colorado DJ Keefer from KBCO Radio. Keefer is quite a character and quite a professional as well, so that's a nice mix. But Keefer is a beloved part of Colorado music history, including both Boulder and Denver, and really everywhere around here. And he really loves the Rolling Stones. There's a picture of a very young Keefer with Keith Richards that I saw recently, and it just blew my mind. They both look really cool, and we'll talk about how Keefer got his name. That has to do with the Stones as well. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Keefer, and I also hope you review Mile High Stash on Apple Podcasts sometime, because it really does help, along with literally any amount of financial support via the donation button at milehighstash.com or just at AdamIce9 on Venmo. I'll see you right back here after my chat with Keefer. So Keefer, how did you get this name Keefer? That's my first question to you, because I know that that's not your real name.
No. My real name is Dave. But when I got my first job at a rock and roll station, there was already a Dave doing mornings. And back then they thought, well, people won't be able to tell the difference. Yeah. It was a stupid premise, but I was hanging out at the station. They said, come hang out at the station, pick up the vibe, and we'll put you on the air the next day. And so I get there and they say, hey, guess what? We're going to put you on this afternoon. And by the way, you've got to change your name. And I've got like 30 minutes to do this. So I've always been a huge Keith Richards fan for all the reasons. And his nickname is Keef, Keef. And I've got a Stones bootleg, and it's got a picture of him with his guitar leaning against an amp. And it says, have you seen Keef standing in the shadows? And right there I said, all right, I'm going to add an ER to it, and I'm going to be Keefer.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So that's where that story came from.
Thank you. But let's go way back. I want to know where you're from and what your first memories of listening to music passionately are.
I grew up, I was born in a small southeastern town, southeastern Illinois town, just in the middle of nowhere. And when I was younger, TV wasn't quite what it is now. I mean, there's like maybe 3 channels, and you really didn't know when it was going to come on the air. So radio was always on in my house. My folks weren't real music people, but in a small community, your hometown radio station, it's like that electronic fence everybody talks over,
Mm.
and communicates and gossips. And you could get the prices on pork bellies and soybeans. You find out who got a DUI the night before, who died at the hospital, what the school lunches were, and then you might hear a Beatles song.
Mm.
So the radio was always on in the house, and I was just fascinated with all the sounds and voices that came out of this little box of knobs and wires. So my dad worked in the oil fields. They were going to transfer him to Oklahoma. And in, the early 60s, Oklahoma was, you didn't want to move there. So my dad decided, I'm going to move to South Florida and I'm going to start building houses. So we moved to Boca Raton. Now, Boca Raton back then was nothing like it is now. It was a sleepy little coastal town, little beach town, and we didn't really even live in town. We lived out in the sticks. And in South Florida, when you live in the sticks, you're usually on the edge of a swamp, and we were. We lived in a little subdivision called Paradise Palms, and I can assure you it was not paradise.
Mm.
When we first drove to the house, we got to the edge of town, and that's where the pavement ended. And it was a 2-track dirt road that led out to this little subdivision. And I remember the very first time we pulled off that road and onto the little 2-track trail, a huge black puma ran across the road. And I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. So we lived in this little subdivision, and I mean, it was cool, but I mean, you had to watch your step. The lake was full of alligators. There were snakes everywhere. But I had a bicycle, I had a Stingray, and my mother had given me a little cheap Motorola transistor radio. So I would ride all over this neighborhood, and I think I had duct taped the radio to my handlebars, and I just listened to the radio all the time. And, in the late 60s, and it was top 40 radio was amazing. It was an explosion of sounds. You had the British invasion going on. I mean, Beatles, Stones, Cream, The Who, soul music of every stripe, from Motown to Stax. You would hear some cool country, and yeah, there was some bubblegum music and novelty songs, but it kept me company. Because a lot of the kids that lived in that neighborhood in the summer, they were all carnies. Their parents worked for the carnivals, and they would all take off in the summer. So I was pretty much left by myself. So my radio became my companion. And in those days, the jocks, the radio personalities, were almost on the same level as the music, the boss jocks. I mean, they were just larger than life. So that was my exposure to radio. And then I had an older cousin who about 5 or 6 years older than me, said, hey man, you need to get off that AM and get to the FM. And he introduced me to my first FM underground station, and my little brain was blown. Plus he was also funneling me records at the time. Whenever he got tired of the albums he bought, wore the grooves off of them, he'd give them to me. So as a third grader, I had one of the coolest record collections in the world. It was Stones, Beatles, Ray Charles, the Supremes. I remember a Tiny Tim record. So radio and music kind of came together all at once.
Yeah. Do you remember some DJs who made a deep impression on you?
There was a guy, his name was Rick Shaw. It was WQAM or WAMQ. I think it was WQAM out of Miami. And he was kind of a big guy. Of course, when I was living in Illinois, Larry Lujak, guys like that, made an impression on me that, you can be a personality alongside the music. But, this first FM station I listened to, I mean, it was almost cliche. The jocks sounded like they had eaten a bowl of Quaaludes before they came to work. And they were like, yeah, and that was the Allman Brothers Band. And now we're going to switch it up and play some Chuck Berry. And it was just like, oh man, it was so cool.
Why did you go back to Illinois for college?
Well, it was, I want to say 1972, my folks got divorced. So, I left what was, a pretty cool experience in Florida, and moving back to my hometown in Illinois, which like I said, southeastern Illinois, a town about 9,000, and it was kind of culture shock.
Mm.
But I didn't have much choice in the matter, but I still had music. I still, listened to the radio. That was my constant companions because when I moved back, I still knew a lot of my friends, but we had completely different experiences. I left in the second grade,
Right.
and here we are in the eighth grade. And I was depressed. I was angry because I had to move back and I just wasn't fitting in. It wasn't like anybody was bullying me or they weren't friendly. They were, but I was not a happy camper in those days.
Yeah. There's this saying from Nelson Mandela that I love, and it goes, there's nothing like going back to a place that stayed the same to see how you yourself have changed.
Exactly. And I mean, at the time, during grades or eighth grade and high school, I just couldn't wait to leave. But as I look back, growing up there probably centered me. If I'd stayed in South Florida, or if I'd grown up in a big city, I'm pretty sure I'd be dead right now because I would just have given into it. But that's where, when I moved back, and this kind of relates to getting into radio. I think I was probably a sophomore, maybe going into my junior year. My aunt from Detroit was staying with us, and Vietnam was still happening. I was probably 2 years away from being eligible for the draft, but my aunt said, our boys aren't going. My son, which is my cousin Rob, and me, goes, they don't have to go. She had married a Canadian, and her husband's brother lived, I think, in Windsor. Goes, we'll just take them over there and they can ride it out. And I mean, back then there were some serious consequences for evading the draft. So we were like, okay, maybe that's an option. And me, I was saying, just roll the dice and see what happens. Maybe the war will be over. And then we came up with the brilliant idea that I was going to be a merchant marine. And I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. You can kind of get your service in, work on a cargo ship, see exotic ports of call, and I could write out my time in the military that way. So we kind of left that on the table. And about 4 months after that, in a rare moment of introspection, I'm sitting in the living room watching a football game, and I was thinking about, what am I going to do with my life? I'd already had the conversation with my mom and my grandmother because I lived with my grandmother at the time as well. And I just said, look, if my grades don't turn around, I'll just go see what happens. If I get drafted, maybe I won't go to Vietnam, or if I do, I'll just keep my head down. And I was watching this USC game, and all these football players were coming out and saying, what their name was, what position they played. And back then they would talk about what their major was. And all these USC football players saying, I'm a speech communication major. And I was like, I wonder what you can do with that, because that was the one class in high school I actually excelled at, because I could be like George Carlin's class clown. I could act out. I could deprive other people of their education and get a grade at it. For some reason, I just didn't have a big problem getting up in front of people and acting out. In fact, one of my projects was to pretty much verbatim do George Carlin's side one, a class clown.
Nice.
But my mom goes, well, I go, what can you do with speech communication? She goes, well, some people use it to become teachers. Some people use it as pre-law. And, you can go into radio and television. And I said, what, radio? Really? Because I spent almost 90% of my free time listening to the radio or listening to music. And right then and there, I had, I kind of turned myself around that next week at school. I thought, well, this will get me out of the draft and it'll get me into school, because pretty much up until that time, all I wanted to do was grow my hair, listen to music, go to as many concerts as I could, smoke weed, drink beer, and play football. In fact, that was pretty much all I was going to school for, so I could play football. And I thought, wow, this could be my ticket, but I've got to get my grades up. So I was laser focused on, improving my grades. I was still like a C plus B minus student, but it was enough to get me into Eastern Illinois University. They had a radio and television program, and I did my first radio show in 1977, and pretty much from then to now, with a few hiccups along the way, that's pretty much how I've paid the rent.
Yeah, man. Well, congratulations on sticking it out. I mean, that's amazing. You knew what you wanted to do, and you did it, and you're still doing it, and that's fantastic.
Well, it's kind of funny. I always kind of knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know it at the time.
Right.
I was just listening to music because, I just loved music, and it just, touched me in a very personal and deep way. I just loved music. And when I found out I could get a job, I get a paycheck for playing rock and roll records or just music, period, it was like, well, there you go. I don't have to wear a suit. I don't have to go to an office, and I can pretty much live life on something close to my own terms.
Yeah. In 1977 is, in my opinion, one of the greatest years in rock and roll history. You have the Sex Pistols, Elvis Costello, The Clash, television, Patti Smith, all this exciting stuff.
It was great. And I got exposed to a lot of that. I mean, living in a small town in rural Illinois, you don't get exposed to a lot of that unless, I mean, I read Rolling Stone, Cream, Crawdaddy, and I read about the New York Dolls and all this stuff going on. But, my record store, the local record store, didn't always have those albums. And, the radio certainly wasn't playing it. But yeah, 1977 was great because I got to play all of that stuff, and bands like the Stones and the Who were putting out really good records at that time. So it was a fun experience to cut my teeth in radio.
What did you think about disco? Because even the Stones and the Grateful Dead even dipped their toes in disco at that time.
Well, the whole thing there, it wasn't quite like a mods rockers thing, but I think I at one time had a bumper sticker that said disco sucks. And, you look back on it now through the prism of time, there was a lot of really good music made in the dance world. And it certainly has had an effect on the music that we listen to now, the same as punk and alternative and hip hop. It all becomes a part of this big gumbo.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people probably hated punk rock, and yet the Ramones have their stamp on pretty much every kind of music that came after them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's go I'm going to ask you your 5 albums that you would take to a remote Colorado cabin in the event of a zombie apocalypse. So why don't you give me 2 of those, and then we'll go back to your story.
Well, I just want to say one thing. I was listening to Munley from Slim Cessna, and he said he did. Yeah, I've only met him once. What a character. I think I might be like him. If it is a zombie apocalypse, I might be too busy reloading to listen to yeah. Can you imagine that? Me and Munley back to back, sawed-off shotguns, saving humanity.
I think you do a pretty good job, you and Munley. That'd be a good team.
Probably. I will say, and I've noticed some people have taken a little bit of liberty with your format. And I was going to say two of the records that didn't make it, but I wanted to give an honorable mention to John Coltrane, Love Supreme, and Ornette Coleman, The Shape of Jazz to Come. If there were 6, I would take those. I came to jazz, appreciated jazz later in life. I was lucky because Dave Benson, who hired me at KBCO, he's a jazz aficionado. Brett Saunders, he writes the jazz column for the Post, and KBCO OG Richard Ray. They've all kind of helped me. Whenever I'm at Twist and Shout or Wax Tracks, it's like, is this a Sun Ra album I should own? I'd text Brett and say, hey, is this one worth? So those get honorable mention, but I will give you one, number 5. Let It Be by the Replacements.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that, the Replacements had been on my radar for a while. I had Stink and I had Hootenanny, but there was just the early 80s, rock and roll got kind of fat and lazy and safe. And I mean, look, if you like Toto and Journey and REO and Styx, Godspeed to you.
Mhm.
But that music didn't do anything for me. And the replacements came on, and they were funny, and they were loud, and they were rough around the edges.
Mhm.
But Let It Be was the album where Paul Westerberg's writing really started to blossom. I mean, there was still some thunder from the previous two records on this album, but I mean, a song like "I Will Dare." I just love that line. How young are you? How old am I? Let's count the rings around my eyes.
Mhm.
That's good. And the fact that he wrote a song about trying to express your emotions to a girl, to an answering machine, that just slays me. And androgynous now, who was writing songs standing up for the trans community? Well, Paul Westerberg was.
Wow.
Yeah.
They were the anti-80s band for sure.
In a way, yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean, 1984 was a really good year. I mean, I could have easily said Double Nickels on the Dime, Minutemen, or Zen
Yeah.
Arcade, Husker Du, but the replacements, I just, Paul Westerberg wrote in a way that I identified with, because I'm kind of the same age as him, maybe a little older, but he was saying the things that I didn't know how to say. And he
Mm.
was putting them out there, and it's like, yeah, I feel the same way. So yeah, Let It Be, the replacements would be my number five. My number four, Kaya, Bob Marley and the Wailers.
Yeah.
That album sometimes gets slagged by critics because he wasn't tackling social issues, he wasn't being political or militant. Time will tell a little bit,
Mhm.
that song, but he was singing about love and the joys of weed.
Mhm.
And boy, what's wrong with that, man?
Yeah.
um and it had the unfortunate it unfortunately came after Exodus, and that's an album that just exists on another plane.
Mhm.
So anything coming after that was going to pale in comparison. But what I don't know if a lot of people know is Bob and the band, when they were in exile in London, they recorded both those albums at the same time.
Oh
Can
well.
you imagine Exodus and Kaya as a double album?
That would be one of the greatest double albums that ever. Be up
Yeah,
there with London Calling and Physical Graffiti.
yeah. Um I was in a radio class, and this dude from Africa was in it, and he and I got to be good buddies. And he came over one afternoon with a bag of weed and Kaya, and I think that's one of the reasons I really like Kaya, because that was the first Marley album I got into,
Mhm.
and then of course I discovered everything after that. But it's a great Saturday or Sunday morning album to put on when you're getting up and moving around, making a little breakfast.
Mhm.
So Bob Marley and the Wailers, Kaya, is my number four.
These are two albums that have not been chosen yet on this show. So you're a
All right,
trailblazer.
all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Glad I could help.
Yeah. So let's go back to 1977 and beyond in the life of not yet Keefer. It was Dave back then.
Let's see. I made it through college, and I thought, all right, I'm ready for the big time. And I moved to St. Louis and sent out demo tapes to all the radio stations, and got rejected one after the other.
Mhm.
I didn't know about this thing about paying your dues.
Right.
So I had spent my last $80 on four tickets to the Rolling Stones in St. Louis, and I was broke. So the guys who lived upstairs from me, they were all chefs at the Pasta House. It was like a chain of restaurants in the Midwest. And I said, guys, I need a job. So I went to work in the kitchen making I made salads. You make the salads at the Pasta House. That's the really popular thing there. You make it at about 10 pounds at a time.
Mm.
You just toss it and you throw it out on the plate. I did sandwiches and desserts. And one Friday night, we were just jammed. And I was alternating between making this 10 pounds of salads and cutting up some sandwiches. And I about sliced my thumb off.
Mm.
And I went to the head chef and I said, dude, I can almost see bone. I got to go to the emergency room. And he goes, are you kidding? We are slammed. Put a Band-Aid on it and go back to work. And I thought, oh, okay. So I
Mm.
did that. And so I've got my hands and this 10 pounds of salad. And my thumb was just throbbing.
Oh God.
And I thought, what's going on? And I pulled my hand out, and the Band-Aid was gone.
Oh God.
And I'm looking down at this salad, and I've got 5 waiters and waitresses demanding salads. And I thought, screw it. You know what? I hate this job. I hate my life right now. So I just started putting it out, and I thought, if somebody bites into it, maybe they'll just think it's a bad artichoke.
Yeah. Oh Jesus.
Yeah. And I thought for sure I was going to get fired.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of days after that, I get a phone call from a girl that I had gone to school with, and she was working for a radio station in Champaign-Urbana, a top 40 station. He goes, hey, and I don't know how she found me. This is before computers and iPhones and internet, but somehow she tracked me down and said, hey, we need an overnight jock at this radio station. I said, yes. I had one last cassette of my air check. I sent it off to the guy, and he goes, how soon can you start? And I said, you tell me when. And New Year's Day, 1982 at midnight, I went to work. And this station, it was a top 40 station. And we were still at that time spinning 45s and albums, but they had this massive rack of 4 reel-to-reel machines. It looked like the cockpit in 20 Leagues Under the Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
It was just this monstrosity, and you activated them by remote. They were outside the studio, but you had a little box that you just press buttons and it would play them in a certain order. One reel was the hit songs of the day. One reel was like what we call recurrent songs that have been popular over the past year. One was a classic rock, and one was kind of a mixed bag of soul and whatever. So that was my first gig, spinning records overnight for the
Did
Stop
you
40
love it?
station. I did, because I didn't smell like oil and vinegar and salad all the time.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was overnights. That's tough. Anybody who's ever worked a third shift can tell you, man, it'll destroy your health if you're not careful. But I loved it. And top 40 radio at the time, not unlike it was when I started listening in the late 60s, was still kind of cool. I mean, if the Stones had a song out, you were playing it. You were playing Whitney Houston, Prince, the whole MTV thing. We almost became whatever MTV was playing, we would play. So you might play, Twisted Sister next to Whitney Houston. Now, in pure top 40 fashion, I might be playing the same Whitney Houston song 3 times in a 6-hour shift, but it taught me to have a personality, because you're playing a lot of this music over and over again. So you have to be able to embellish it, make it entertaining. So I don't regret, doing that at all. It really helped me cut my teeth. Then after that, the little company that owned that station opened a rock station in Springfield, Illinois. And they said, hey, you want to go do afternoon drive there? And I go, absolutely. I'm ready to go.
Did you develop your radio voice, or was it just the way you talked already?
A bit of it was the way I talked, and then just listening. When I would listen to radio stations, I would listen to the jocks when I was young and when I was coming up, and listening to what they were doing. And I may have tried, but I think after a while, it just kind of developed into what it is. I mean, I sometimes have a hard time listening to myself.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, it's like, I don't like hearing my voice. But as far as the way I developed, I would just listen to other people and try to take what they were doing really well and trying to put my own stamp on it.
Yeah. And did you have a good reaction from listeners? Like, did you get letters and things that were supportive?
A little bit. I mean, sometimes you'd get letters, phone calls. When you work the overnight shift, boy, you talk to, it's like Darwin's waiting room. There's a lot of twisted people there. And you get some, some really weird. I mean, even he hasn't said anything in a while, but there was a guy that used to send me at KBCO, just all like he'd go to a yard sale and send everything he picked up to me. He sent me like an amazing stamp collection one time. It's like, well, what am I going to do with this?
Yeah. What was it like all of a sudden being a celebrity and maybe going on dates, maybe somebody would say, "Oh, I recognize your voice from the radio."
Well, I was married, and they kind of had a disastrous effect on that, and I'm not proud of it.
Yeah,
I kind of I gave in to the rock and roll lifestyle,
you
and
indulged.
yes, I did.
Hmm.
And I'm really sorry how that ended, but I had a lot of fun. Um, I won't do that. I won't say that, but no, to this day, I feel bad about how that
Yeah,
happened. But
yeah.
yeah, you meet people and you go
Hmm.
out and, they want to buy you drinks, or sometimes they want to tell you, how bad you suck. And why
Yeah.
do you play this song all the time? And that kind of stuff. But just the fact that they listen and they know,
Hmm.
that's fine with me.
So you're in Springfield, and did you have this sort of shining light of Denver of like wanting to go toward that light? Is that true?
Always. Yeah. Yeah. I,
Why Denver?
Well, KBCO did and still does do some amazing things as a radio station, and I wanted to be a part of that. There is a radio station in Chicago, WXRT, that I really liked as well, but nobody ever left that station. People stayed there forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody ever left there because everybody wanted to work there.
Hmm.
Keishi and St. Louis, I kind of had designs on. They were a pretty cool station at one time. Um, but Boulder, just I wanted to move west. I want to get out of
Hmm.
the Midwest. I wanted to get west of the Mississippi, and KBCO was doing all these cool things and playing some cool music. So I started sending air checks to them. I think about 1985, and we'd been doing this dance for almost 10 years before I got hired there. In fact, when they were just a little standalone station, you used to have to take a drug test to work
Wow.
there. Yeah, and at that time, I thought, well, I had gotten to the point where they said, well, we like you. We're going to you've made the final cut for this job. We're going to send you the application, and just know that if we have you out, you're going to need to take a drug test. And I thought, at the time, there's no way I was going to
Right.
pass it. So I started going on a serious detox uh, program, and of course, I didn't get the job, but I stayed with him. I stayed in contact with him over the course of 10 years. And finally, I got the gig.
And I'm skipping over actually the fact that KBCO was in Boulder. It was over by Mike's Camera.
Well, it had about three locations in
Uh-huh.
Boulder. The last one was above Mike's Camera, which
Hmm.
was kind of interesting. But this was when they were still developing film,
Hmm.
and the chemical smells on
Oh
some
God.
afternoons. Oh, you just leave there with a screaming headache. Uh, they always, iHeartRadio always wanted to keep us there because there was this mystique about, KBCO being in Boulder. I mean, it's right
Hmm.
there in the call letters. But rent just got outrageous.
Yeah.
And they always had studios for us in the tech center. And they just said, look, it's outrageous to pay this kind of rent.
Hmm.
Just move. And we tried to come up with every possible way not to not to move, come up with any kind of scenario. And we just couldn't do it. And so reluctantly, everybody moved. Now, I've always lived in Denver when I moved to Colorado. So it wasn't, I didn't really care. My commute was cut in half. But
Hmm.
yeah, there was a few tears shed.
And this is 1999 that you started at
Yeah, yeah,
KBCO, right?
yeah. I was working at this radio station in Springfield, Illinois, and I just
Hmm.
got tired of, the music, and I felt that I was getting a little stagnant in my life, and I'd met my future wife Susan, and she kind of felt the same way.
Hmm.
And a buddy of mine had taken over this funky, quirky little station in Columbia, Missouri. And he goes, I need some help, man. You want to come? And I said, yeah. And Susan said, well, I want to go back to school. So let's make a plan. We're going to stay there for 4 years. I'll finish school. You get the experience in AAA radio, and
Hmm.
then we move. And almost 4 years to the day, She wound up getting a job. She has a couple of brothers that live here in Denver. So we
Hmm.
had a support system. And she moved out, got a gig, and then said, I've got enough that we can get an apartment, come out here. So I basically told KBCO, uh, I'm coming. I'm
Yeah.
coming. Whatever shift you have, I'll take. And I started at KBCO the same way I started in radio. I was doing overnights on the weekends.
Hmm.
And then after I'd come home Saturday morning at 6, I'd catch a nap and then I'd go back and work Sunday evening. And then I loaded trucks at UPS during the week.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah, during the twilight, I'd go in at midnight and get off at 6, and that way I kind of kept my schedule open if KBCO needed me to slip in and do an afternoon shift or a midday shift. So I wanted to keep my schedule open as much as possible. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was loading trucks during the overnights, and on the weekends working at KBCO.
It sounds like you've been a hard worker most of your life, and I wonder what you would do if you ever stopped working. Would it just feel uncomfortable to you?
No, man, I'd go fishing.
You go
I would
crazy.
I
Yeah,
would get in a hammock and read. I mean,
that's great.
I was talking about, growing up in Alney, and my mom, she was a young single woman, divorced with two kids who were on the verge of delinquency, puberty, and all that other stuff. But she always instilled a really strong work ethic in us.
Mm,
And I think that's what really has helped me, get to where I am.
yeah,
I have envisioned the day that I wouldn't be behind a microphone, and I used to think, oh, I would just do it until they kick me out. But there's other things in my life I would like to do. So the end is coming. When it is, I don't know,
yeah.
because I actually kind of feel, Adam, I'm actually kind of understand what I'm doing now. I think I've actually kind of gotten good at it.
Right, right.
So I don't want to leave while I think I've got my mojo working.
Yeah. Why don't you give me your next two albums?
All right. Number 3, you kind of referenced this a bit earlier, a London Calling, The
Yeah.
Clash. I like the first 2 records, but London Calling, like with all great double albums, it just seemed like they had a well of inspiration writing all
Hmm.
these great songs. And like a lot of great double albums, it was either their influences or the stuff that they were into came to light. I mean, yeah, there's punk, but there's reggae, there's ska, there's lounge jazz, there's rockabilly. They
Yep.
rocked hard. And even when they weren't sloganeering, being political, being revolutionary, the music was almost revolutionary just because they said there's no boundaries
Yeah.
of what
Yeah.
we're doing, and they just went for it. And it's such a satisfying album. I listened to it again earlier this week from beginning to end. It's just like, what an amazing record.
Do you have a vinyl collection?
Yeah, oh yeah. I've got
Yeah.
it's right here. I've had it's turned over several times.
Hmm.
When we made the move from Columbia to Denver, CDs and albums probably close to 20,000,
Wow.
and I was broke. Susan was already out here working. I needed another like $300 to rent a trailer to haul behind the U-Haul to bring
Mhm.
my car out. So I loaded up my VW Jetta with all as many albums as I get in. I mean, it was resting on the rear axles, and I
Mm.
drove into St. Louis to Streetside Records, and I just said, "Here you go. I'm going to go down here and eat a pizza and drink a beer, and when I come back, just tell me what you can give me." And it wound up to be about $500 worth of albums, so I was able to rent the trailer, have enough gas to get out. But I've turned it over several times
Mm.
now. I we kind of I'm fortunate, or maybe not fortunate. My wife loves vinyl just as much. So whenever we go into a record store, it's like, oh, if I can get out of there under triple figures in
Mm.
total cost, I consider myself lucky. But I have a nice little collection. I
Yeah.
try to keep it. Really kind of the essential stuff, but I've had to pare it down a few times. Just
Right.
I mean, it's easy to stream stuff, but I like the whole ritual of taking the album out, cleaning it, dropping the needle, and listening to it the way they wanted it to be
Hmm.
absorbed. So we have a lot of vinyl parties at Casa Keefer.
Yeah, man. Um, do you have these 5 albums that you're choosing? Do you have them all on vinyl?
Um, I, I don't. I think I may still have London Calling. I definitely. I think Let It Be is on CD because again, albums kind of come and go in my collection depending on what my financial state is
Yeah, yeah,
at
yeah.
the time. But at one time or another, they've all been on vinyl. I think Let It Be is the only one that I just have on CD right now.
Did you get to see the Clash play live?
Yes, saw them at the Aragon Ballroom in Chicago. Combat Rock had just come out,
Hmm.
and it was an astounding concert. You got the feeling that these guys meant it. These
Yeah,
guys
yeah.
were in it for all the right reasons, and it was such a good show. Such a good show. Joe Strummer had his mohawk.
Hmm.
Um, Mick Jones looked like he could have been in the Stones. He looked
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
cross between Keith and Ron and Jeff Beck.
Hmm.
And then Paul Simonon, he was there in his beret and camouflage. And I can't remember. I think it was Terry Chan. I don't know who was the drummer at the time, but they were just so good. And what was interesting is this Illinois band, the Elvis Brothers, opened up, and then in between the Elvis Brothers and the Clash, they had 2 big movie screens on either side in the ballroom, and they were showing Rollerball.
Nice.
It just seemed like the perfect setup
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
Clash to come out in 1982. But yeah, it was an amazing story. And here's something that my wife likes to throw in my face every once in a while.
Mhm.
When we first moved to Denver, it's like the first week, and between us we had $100, and we were living in a cool little brownstone off Lafayette and Colfax. And so we were going to go get something to eat. And as we were walking across Colfax at the Ogden, Joe Strummer and the Mescaleros were playing.
Hmm.
And Susan goes, "Oh, we ought to go." And I go, "I'm hungry. I haven't eaten in a day. And, Joe Strummer will come back around." And we,
Oh,
we, we, we had an argument in the middle of Colfax Avenue. And I eventually won, saying, I've got to eat. I want to go get something to eat and have a beer and go home. And I said, "Well, we'll catch him next time." And of course, there wasn't a next time, about a year
God
later.
damn it, Keefer.
I know. I say
Yeah,
that, I that's not a shining moment in my life.
yeah, yeah.
I made the wrong call there.
We'll have to show you someday. I have a really big tattoo on my shoulder that says "Death or Glory," because
Oh
that's
yeah.
that's the only band that matters to me,
Yeah.
as they say.
Yeah. Well, and the only misstep they ever had was that last record, Cut the Crap.
That's not a Clash record. I
No.
mean, he fired everybody
Yeah.
and made that record, and he regretted that the rest of his life. The fact that
Every, Everybody,
yeah.
he and Paul certainly did. Yeah, they didn't need to do that. And the album that I have gone back and through the prism of time really enjoy
Mhm.
is Sandinista.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's got 36 tracks, and they joke that they made that for people who worked on oil rigs who had nothing to do, you know, because it takes all day to listen to. And I don't know how many genres are on Sandinista, maybe 20.
Yeah, yeah. I
Uh,
mean, all that dub, because weren't they in New York at that time? It seemed like they
yeah,
were soaking up all that New York, the hip
hip hop.
hop and the
Mhm.
all that. And when it first came out, I was confused. And over the years, I've gone back and reassessed it, and it's a messy masterpiece.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so album number 4.
Are we four? We did. Let me see. Oh yeah, okay.
Mhm.
Four would be Bob Dylan, Blood on the Tracks.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've been through some breakups, so that's a
Yes.
breakup. That's a breakup record.
Well, Dylan has been on record saying, "Oh no, I was influenced by Russian literature." It's like,
Mm,
Jacob Dylan has gone on record saying, "I can't listen to the album because it's the sound of my parents breaking up."
mhm.
But yes, that is an album that whenever somebody has used my heart like an ashtray, or I've been,
Hmm.
messed up over a girl. That's the album I go to. And I've gone through 8 tracks of that. I've gone through a couple of albums of that. I've gone through CDs of that just because it's, in fact, I came home last night. My wife was listening to it. It was, it was that one record where Dylan kind of dropped the veil
Hmm.
and wore his emotions on his sleeve. And like you said, you listen to that record and you realize, hey, somebody like Bob Dylan, he can have his heart broken and get over it. And so can I.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's angry at
Oh,
times, it's sweet and loving at times, and then other times it's angry and incredulous, or almost
yeah.
in denial. I mean, it goes through all the stages of grief.
And there's some riddles and puzzles on there, but yeah, Idiot Win, boy, that
Mm-hmm.
is. I mean, he's been angry elsewhere on record, but boy, nothing quite like that.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah,
tell me,
it's an album that I hold near and dear to my heart.
tell me about leaving KBCO and then coming back.
Well, I got caught up in some layoffs,
Hmm.
and Andy Torrey. I don't. Do you know Andy, the front of
No, I
house
don't
guy
think so.
for Big Head Todd and the Monsters? He was the KBCO Studio C engineer,
Mm-hmm.
and we got let go that same day. So we immediately went to a bar, as one
Yeah.
will do, and he eventually got on with he went back to work for Big Head Todd and the Monsters. I went back to loading trucks. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and then Open Air had just started,
Hmm.
and they needed somebody to do their promotions, and I said I can do that. I said I'll do that if you let me have an air shift, and
Hmm.
that eventually morphed into me doing mornings, and I was with them for, I want to say, was it about 3 years.
Yeah.
It was interesting. A lot of the music they played I kind of knew, um, but yeah, it was interesting to get into that world of non-commercial radio.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then after about 3 years there, Benji McPhail, who used to work at KBCO, he was up in Greeley, uh, with a radio station that was doing NPR news in the morning and in the afternoon. And then he
Mhm.
was just kind of playing kind of an interesting mix of Americana music throughout the day. And they had their eyes on an FM signal that was going to
Mhm.
be coming available, and they wanted to snatch it and do kind of a non-com rock station. A lot of public radio clusters were starting to let go of their classical music stations, or
Mhm.
instead of adding that, we're looking to add something that was kind of a rock station to bring new people into public radio.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what they wanted to do. They only had the news station. They thought they would add a non-com rock station,
Yeah.
and so I went to work for them. We worked a year, um, where they had the format of news in the morning and the afternoon and music in the middays. And then they finally got the FM signal, and we launched the Colorado Sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was with them for about a year.
Mhm.
And that's when KBCO called me back. And at first I said no. I just didn't know if I wanted to go back to the pressure cooker of commercial radio. And Scott Arbo, was persistent. I turned him down 3 times, and then finally said, "Okay, let's talk." And um, they offered me a wage that my wife said, if you don't take it, I'm going to leave you.
Yeah.
So I went back, and
Mhm.
and I don't regret it. I love my KBCO family. I love being a part of the tribe that goes all the way back to 1977.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I can't imagine. I've had offers to go other places when I was at KBCO, but there's just only one KBCO, and I'd be a fool to leave.
It's nice that you also got to. It's a lot like a relationship, They were interested in you once you started dating somebody else. They were like, no, 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 no. We really want to be with you, because
well, well,
you got to go around and work with all these other great people Alicia Sweeney and Benji and
Yeah.
Margot. I mean, these are great people.
Yeah, and it was fun to do that, and it was fun to. I mean, Adam, I loved my Uncle Tupelo Velvet Underground segues. I mean,
Yeah,
that was a lot of fun, and yeah, I learned a lot from Alicia and all those people
mhm.
that were there, and it was nice working with Margot and Benji and building a radio station out of nothing. I mean, you
Yeah,
talk about some hard work. That
right.
was it, but it was very fulfilling, and I enjoyed it. But KBCO was, the place I always wanted to be. And
Yeah, that's
it
your
was
home.
nice. It was nice that they wanted me back. They never wanted to let me go in the first place, but
Right.
economics being the way it is, I just, I didn't make the cut that time.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you your fifth and final album and let you get on with this amazing Colorado day. It is so beautiful outside. I'm looking at Long's Peak out my office window. But
Well, I've seen the pictures on
yeah,
Facebook. You do have an amazing view. I've already been out today. I've had to trim the pot plants a little
yeah,
bit,
yeah,
water some of the others. So it is a nice fall day.
yeah.
But I
But
love talking music and I love talking radio. So you know,
yeah, man,
you're not keeping me from doing anything that I don't already love.
it's an honor to speak with you because you are such an icon and such a proponent of not only great music but also local music too.
Oh well, it's kind of you to
Yeah,
say.
yeah, yeah. But first, I want to do a little lightning round.
Sure.
Uh, you know, what's it like to have the greatest birthday on earth, August 20th, which
Yeah,
I
you and
also
I.
share. Yeah,
It is great, and we also share it with Robert Plant
that's
and
right.
John Hyatt. And you sent me. There's somebody else that's really cool that's got it.
It might be Elvis. I'd have to look it up.
No,
I'm
Elvis.
not
Elvis
sure.
is no. There was somebody. I don't know who. There's somebody else had sent me.
Yeah,
Uh, I'll do it. But yeah,
yeah, yeah,
it's a
yeah,
great
yeah,
birthday. Yeah, it's a great
yeah,
way to wrap up the summer.
yeah. What music has stuck with you over the years? I know you're going to say the Stones, but music before you became a DJ that you still love just as much.
I'm a sucker for pop music, something that's got a pop hook in it. And
Yeah.
it could be the Ramones or Cheap Trick, it could be
Mm-hmm.
the Archies or the Cowsills.
Mm-hmm.
I just good pop music I really like. Also really old blues,
Oh,
like
great.
World War II era blues, Robert Johnson, Blind Blake, Charlie Patton,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. I can listen to that all day long. That's, yeah, and anything that's kind of derivative of that, I enjoy.
Skip James. Is that something you're into?
I don't know Skip James that much. I know who he is, but I can't say that I know a song
Yeah.
that he's done. But I guarantee you, I will before the weekend is out. I'll dial some up.
The Skip James that just him and a piano is my favorite because it's really haunting. It's
Really.
great shit. Um, what music surprised you that you started liking over the years that you never thought you would like? And then what music surprised you that you stopped liking?
I don't know. All right. Um, Country music.
Mhm.
I liked the Johnny Cash and the Merle Haggard and the George Jones more and more as I got older. I mean, I would hear it on the radio, and but I never really went out and bought it. Never listened to it to really enjoy it, and I do now. Really do. And there's a lot of really good music now being made from not really hard, not new country. That is an abomination. But people like Zach Bryan and Tyler Childers,
Yeah.
Jamie Wyatt. Some of these people are making some really compelling music. This new Zach Bryan album, if he didn't have a twang in his voice, that would be it'd be a folk album.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's music I like. Some of the guilty pleasure stuff. I'll go back and listen to um, like Foghat or Blue
Mm,
Oyster Cult or some of that, and it just doesn't quite have the zing that it used to. It's
right.
still kind of a guilty pleasure, but if Slow Ride came on the radio, I'd probably just keep going.
Do you still get nervous interviewing rock stars?
Yeah, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, a little bit, only because not that I'm in the same room with them. It's I want to do a good job.
Right.
And you want to when I interview somebody, and Brett Saunders is really good at this too. I always try to come up with more questions than I need,
Right.
because you don't know where the interview is going to go. And see, Brett is really good at thinking quick on his feet.
Hmm.
He if something goes somewhere, he's so smart and well-rounded, he can go with it. I always try to, and I try to do that myself, but I always try to have more questions than needed. And then I'll pare it down before I go in, but I always have those in the back of my mind.
Hmm.
And I've also had to learn that you can't really steer somebody a certain way in an interview. You might read where they said something really interesting and you
Hmm.
want them to try to repeat it, and you try to walk them up to it. And like the old saying goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't
Hmm.
always make it drink. So that is that. It's people that I'm really, really a fan of. I just want to do a really good job. And I have found that bands that I don't really care about, I actually wind up having really good interviews with them, because
Hmm.
I'm kind of relaxed and we just start
Right.
chit chatting, and yeah. But boy, I tell you, I'm trying to think somebody who I got really nervous. I mean, Buddy Guy was kind of I was anxious. And it's like you want a good job, you want to do a good job. And it's like, wow, I'm talking to one of the last connections to the old blues
Yep.
guys. And you don't want to waste their time. You want it to be interesting for them, because if it's interesting to them, then it's going to be interesting to the people listening.
Yeah. Have you had a chance to interview the Stones?
No, I've met them.
Yeah. Yeah.
A buddy of mine was working for Keith Richards' record "Talk Is Cheap," and when they played in Chicago, I went up to see him, and he got me backstage, and I got a few minutes to chit chat with him and
Hmm.
talk him up. Um, when they played Pepsi Center, I can't remember. It might have been they might have been out with like a 40 licks
Hmm.
best of. I can't remember what it was, but we got back for a little photo and just a really quick meet and greet. But
That's
those
great.
guys, yeah, those guys come in, they take the picture and then they're gone.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not like you could do that. But I've had my life has exceeded my dreams
Mm.
in so many ways. Like I've got to meet Pete Townsend and chat him up,
Hmm.
Lou Reed. Um, it's every time I'm with somebody like that, I just think back to myself in high school, thinking, "Gosh, I wish I could do this." And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, here I am.
You did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Okay. Your fifth and final zombie apocalypse album.
Exile on Main Street, Rolling Stones. That has been my solid number one for as long as I can remember. Uh, the record got mixed reactions when it first came out,
Mhm.
but again, through the prism of time, it's their shining moment. Now I get it. It might be easier to put on Let It Bleed or
Sticky
Beggar's
Fingers.
Banquet. Yeah, Sticky Fingers,
Hmm.
because it is a dark, weary, murky, druggy album.
Hmm.
But it is the sum of all their influences
Yeah.
at that time coming together. It's almost like they became a Southern rock and roll band
Yeah.
on parts of this record. And the way that it's parsed out side by side. You get the rockin' side one,
Hmm.
you get the country side two, then side three. I mean, there's blues, there's the great Keith Richards happy. You
Hmm.
get some kind of voodoo, gree, New Orleans stuff
Hmm.
in there, and then you get kind of the soul rock album side four that wraps it up. But the music is compelling, and then you take in the myth and the story behind it all. You've got a band that had been very successful, but they wake up one morning and realize they're broke. They're out
Hmm.
of money. They can't pay their taxes. So in the middle of the night, they flee England and they move to the south of France and think, okay, we'll set up shop here and we'll cut an album. We'll go on the road and make some money. when they get to the south of France, they realize there's no studios anywhere, proper studios to record an album.
Mhm.
And as Keith Richards said, I've got this mansion, and everybody's looking around saying, "Hey, it's got a basement. We can do this." And so they bring the Rolling Stones mobile unit over, and if you've ever seen a picture of it, it's like an army truck,
Mhm.
and in the back of it they've got a mixing board, reel to reels, and monitors. And so they they're running wires in windows and doors down to the basement. They're stealing electricity from the telephone poles, and they're down in a studio that's damp, that's humid. Instruments are going out of tune, they're losing power. And then of course all the hangers on, you got Graham Parsons and everybody
Mhm.
else hanging out doing loads of drugs. You've got bikers, groupies, gangsters, just the whole mythology of the record. It
Yeah,
kind of, you know, is just part of the experience when you dive into Let It or Exile on Main Street.
that's a great choice and one of the greatest rock and roll albums. If there ever was a rock and roll album,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't understand why Loving Cup is not a song that you hear on the radio all the time because it's one of their greatest songs.
Well, I think so. It's they're the country music. I mean, they'd done a little country before and after, but it almost seemed like it was a parody or tongue in cheek.
Mhm.
Here it was like lived in. It's
Yeah,
like I
yeah.
said, it's they had become a country band on that side, but a
Mhm.
Rolling Stones country band. They, Torn and Frayed, Loving
Yeah.
Cup, Sweet Virginia. All those songs are great. I can remember hearing Sweet Virginia on the radio when
Mm.
you didn't have to bleep out, got to scrape the shit right off your
Yeah,
shoes.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to call you during one of your, afternoon shifts and request Loving Cup. That's gotta happen.
That or we have got a nice edit of Sweet Virginia where he
Oh,
says you
great.
got to scrape it off your shoes. They've reduced shit to it.
Yeah.
So yeah. But yeah. I hardly a month goes by that I don't listen to a side of Exile.
Have you heard the Fish and Sharon Jones?
Yeah.
It was pretty great in my opinion.
It was pretty good. I mean, I thought that it was a pretty cool choice that they decided to
Yeah.
do that and got the Dap Kings and
Yeah.
Sharon Jones to come out and do it. I've listened to it. I mean, I listened to it. It makes me want to go back to listen to the original. But I
Right.
thought it was cool that they did it.
It would have been fun to be there. Yeah. But the one thing that Fish can't do is play dirty. And
Yeah.
that's a dirty album.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's the one thing about a lot of the records that I've picked is there's some bum notes in there.
Hmm.
um it's a little rough. There's some times where they're singing off key, but that is part of the thing with music that I like, that it's real.
Yeah.
uh the fact that they might hit a bum note or they might sing a little off key, it sort of brings them down to our level.
Yeah. 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 Or so we think.
So we think. Yeah. I'm still not getting thrills on Learjets and stuff like that, I
Yeah.
guess.
I don't think that on my best day as a drummer, I would play as good as Charlie Watts on his worst day, but I'd like
Well,
to, when it's
yeah,
messy, you'd like to think, oh, that's so human. It's like, well,
he
no, it's
is.
still great. It's actually still great.
I don't know. Did he ever hit a bad note in the Stones? Because you can go back and hear a lot of flaws in some of the music, but he seemed to always be rock steady. Although he couldn't play the drum fill or the drum break for oh geez, what's the song? Tumbling Dice. He always
Right.
had he had a mental block on that, and that's
Uh-huh.
Jimmy Miller playing the drums on that.
There
Yeah.
are some lovable Charlie Watts, flubs like the beginning to Start Me Up and speeding up on Honky Tonk Women,
Yeah.
by the time the song's over, they're almost at double time, but that's rock, it's rock and roll.
Yeah, yeah,
That's how it
yeah,
should be.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, well, God bless Charlie Watts, man. It's too
Yeah.
bad he's no longer around.
Yeah.
But I guess they've got him on a couple of the songs on this new album coming.
Oh, great.
So,
Yeah, I can't wait to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me, Keefer.
It's been a gas. I have listened to some of Mile High Stash. And I thought, well, when am I going to get a call?
It's such an honor to talk with you, and I will have to give the studio a call one day and request Levin Cup. That would be fun. Yeah.
Do so, and I hope we can do this again, because I'll have another 5 for you that we can talk about.
That'll change, I'm sure. A year from now, we'll do it again.
Well, Exile on Main Street will still be number 1, I think.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
Enjoy your day.
Yeah, bye-bye now.
I'll give you another hour, then I gotta run, I gotta fly away, leave you to fall, leave you to stuff your flower.
That was Keefer and me talking music and his life history and work history as a DJ. And he mentioned how he was trying to get on the show for a while and be a guest on Mile High Stash. It was really just a time thing. But I wanted to say that I'm always open to emails at milehighstash.com. If you're somebody who is, it's actually interesting. I don't know exactly who I want on the show. It's interesting people who love music. You could be a musician, or you could be a DJ, or, I've had Broadway producers and stand-up comics, but music is really the genesis of most of the conversations and friendships that I have, and so it's not necessary that you are in a band or you're a singer-songwriter, but if you don't like music, I don't think you'd be a very good guest. So anyway, it is milehighstash@gmail.com if you ever want to get in touch with guest suggestions or complaints or life advice. I can definitely always use that. But thanks so much for listening, and I will see you next Monday as usual.
Go on and fade to gray if you got to. Maybe you'll do better without God, and maybe I'll do better without you. Well, I wish that were true, and I wish that were you sitting across from me instead of this impersonation of who